Order. We start with questions to Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero, Harpreet, Uppal.
Question number 1, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Today, the Energy Secretary is already at COP29 in Baku, where he will be leading climate negotiations, so he gives his apologies for today. The Prime Minister is also at COP and will be speaking at the Global Leaders Summit, announcing our ambitious 1.5 aligned NDC and showing the UK is truly back on the international stage. A written statement will also be made later today.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the leadership that the government is showing, particularly on the NDC, as the Right Honourable Member mentioned. The news that this year is likely to be the hottest on record across the world is deeply concerning and reminds us that climate breakdown is a global challenge that we all must face. So does the Minister agree with me that we must have ambitious plans at home so we can go to COP and challenge other world leaders to do more to tackle climate change?
Minister.
Thank you. I completely agree with my honourable friend. There is a direct link between taking action to protect the British people at home and leading on climate action abroad. If we want to protect our country from future energy shocks and the runaway cost of climate chaos, we have to work with other countries to protect our planet. And we now have the credibility to do this because of the action we've taken since entering government, as was apparent when I attended pre-COP in Baku last month and as the Prime Minister will demonstrate in Baku today.
Carla.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I warmly welcome the new government target to cut carbon emissions, and I know the Secretary of State and the Minister thoroughly understand the importance of joined-up action on climate justice. So can she tell us whether every single government policy across every government department will now be assessed to check whether it's compatible with 1.5 degrees, and what steps the government is taking to ensure the Global South is properly compensated for climate loss and damage?
Minister.
Okay, on the second point first, we want to make sure that at this COP we fully operationalise the loss and damage fund so that we then start getting money into it and channeling money to developing countries. We also want to do that through the NCQG that we hope will be ambitious and multi-layered. In terms of making sure that our policies across the piece, that's very much my job, we will be responding to the Committee on Climate Change's report soon, which she will know was quite critical of the last government's action. We will be setting out our plan as to how we implement the NDC, and we'll also be looking at the next carbon budget. So in all of those, it will require effort share across government departments to make sure that we can actually meet. It's not just about setting ambitious targets, it's about making sure, unlike the last government, that we've got a strategy to get us there.
Noah Law. Are you standing? Yeah, it's Toby Perkins. He is a man that's ready to go.
I'm ready to go. And so's the Prime Minister. It's great to see that he's over in Baku showing that leadership. But the recent Cali conference was a disappointment. Ultimately, nations weren't able to reach agreement. So alongside the positive steps the UK government is taking, can the Minister tell us more about what we are doing to have those conversations with international partners to recognise that we need an agreement that brings all the Western nations together, showing that equal ambition?
Minister.
I thank my honourable friend for that question. I know that he was out at Cali, and while there was some progress on things like DSI, there is more that needs to be done. We are very seized of the need to join up that nature and climate crisis in terms of if hopefully when I head out to COP tomorrow, you'll be hearing more from us on our efforts to protect the forests and the support that we're giving to countries that are at risk of deforestation. We're also looking at nature-based solutions to climate change, and that I know the Minister for Nature will be out there as well and will have more to say, but I entirely agree with him that we can't deal with one crisis in isolation from the other.
Jess Brumfuller.
Mr. Speaker, in order for the UK to be an international leader on climate change, we need to bring the business community with us. The Somerbury Company in my Chichester constituency recently invested £8 million in making sure that they are carbon neutral, but then they were quoted a further £3 million to be able to feed their excess energy into the grid. What is the Minister doing to make additional grid connections affordable and accessible for green businesses?
Minister.
Okay, well that is very much something that my honourable friend, the Minister for Energy, is involved with, and we've also set up the Energy Superpower Mission Board headed by Chris Stark that is, and had a conversation with him yesterday about what we can do to ensure there is grid capacity and grid connections in the right places. If she's got a specific issue, if she wants to write to me, then I can make sure that it's passed on to him.
Welcome, we Shadow Minister John Morrissey to the front there.
Yeah. When I asked the Secretary of State about the appointment of Rachel Kite as his international climate envoy in the last oral questions, he failed to confirm whether Quadrigen Capital's £4 million donation to the Labour Party had been declared to DESNZ prior to her appointment. I still have not had a reply from my letter on the 17th of October, so will the Minister confirm whether the Secretary of State declared these interests to DESNZ before Rachel Kite's appointment, and whether ministers have ever met directors of Quadrigen Capital or Quadrigen Climate Foundation? Thank you.
Minister.
I'm sure the Shadow Minister will get a reply to her letter in due course, but I can tell her that Rachel Kite is incredibly well respected and her appointment as our special representative has been welcomed across the board.
Catherine Atkinson.
Here, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Good morning, Mr. Speaker. With your permission, I'll answer this question with questions 3, 16 and 20. In just 4 short months, we have made rapid progress on achieving our mission for clean power by 2030. We've set up Great British Energy and announced its headquarters in Aberdeen. We've secured a record-breaking 131 renewables projects and consented record amounts of solar. We're getting on with delivering lower bills, energy security, good jobs and climate action.
Catherine Atkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Rolls-Royce in Derby is an international leader in the research and development of small modular reactors, and it's fantastic that the government has acknowledged the role that SMRs will play in clean power generation, energy security and green jobs. In the budget, we heard that the final decision on Great British Nuclear's SMR competition will conclude in spring 2025. Does the Minister agree that it is important that this opportunity is seized as soon as possible?
Minister.
Well, I agree with my honourable friend that nuclear will play an essential role in our clean power mission and will continue to be a critical part of our energy mix as we progress towards 2030 and far beyond. Great British Nuclear is continuing to drive forward the competition on small modular reactors, with bids currently being evaluated by the Department, and I look forward to having more to say on this in due course.
Will Esterson chair?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The last government held a consultation into electricity market arrangements, but in spite of saying it was its flagship policy in this area, it didn't publish the results of the consultation. Does my honourable friend agree with me that electricity and indeed energy market reform is crucial to achieving the government's stated 2030 clean energy targets and reducing bills? And can he say if and when this government will be publishing the results of the last government's consultation?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for the question and congratulate him again on his appointment as chair of the Select Committee. He brings a huge amount of knowledge and experience to the role. And I agree with him the importance of reviewing electricity market arrangements in the country. We're building on the consultation of the previous government. We'll have more to say in the months ahead. This is a crucial element of how we get to clean power by 2030 and to make sure that our energy system of the future is fit for what will be a different way of managing energy right across the country. We'll have more to say on this in the months ahead.
Baggy Shanker.
Last week, a report published by the National Energy System Operator noted that despite the programme of rollout of small modular reactors being developed for the mid-2030s, in reality, a 2030 rollout date would be possible. With the SMR technologies holding exciting and significant potential for investment in jobs and infrastructure in constituencies like mine in Derby South, has the Minister considered the value of bringing forward the rollout of SMRs to 2030?
Minister.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for the question, and he is right that nuclear will play a crucial role, and also that not only does it deliver on our energy security, but it also creates good, well-paid jobs. Unlike the previous government, who in 14 years didn't deliver a single nuclear project, many consultations and processes, but not a single nuclear power station was built, this government is getting on with delivering on our nuclear future.
Joe Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week's report from the Energy Systems Operator showed that clean power by 2030 is not only achievable, but can lead to cheaper bills and more secure systems. Does the Minister agree with me that the only way to permanently protect bill payers is to go as far and as fast towards our clean power mission by 2030?
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right. The report that was published by the Independent Energy System Operator laid out that not only is it entirely achievable to reach our clean power mission, but that it will bring down bills. And the importance in that report is that it sets out the course for how this is possible. And the reality is, which the party opposite refuses to accept, that the only way to get us off the roller coaster of high bills is to deliver at pace the clean energy that we know will deliver energy security, climate leadership and bring down bills for people right across the country.
Tom Jugendar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm delighted that the Minister is setting out the report that promises extra £40 billion a year of investment in the energy sector, and presumably the taxes to go with it, which is of course going to come off the businesses that are otherwise paying for everything else in the budget that's just gone by. Is there anything at all in his proposal that is actually going to bring down the cost of energy and not be replaced by taxpayer funding? Because it appears at the moment there's zero, and already energy prices are going up.
Minister.
Well, I would encourage the right honourable gentleman to read the NESO's report, because it does in great detail set out that not only is clean power by 2030 achievable, but that it will lead to lower bills. And what he speaks about in terms of investment misses the point that in the last few weeks we've announced billions of pounds of private sector investment in these projects. Indeed, just today, £1 billion announced by Scottish Power in these projects. Companies are choosing to invest in this country when they didn't under the party opposite. And the reality that he has to answer is that once upon a time this party opposite recognised that the drive to net zero was important. They've abandoned that commitment now.
Sir Bernard Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I first of all thank the Minister for agreeing to meet the offset group of MPs later on today, and we're very much looking forward to that meeting. But does he recognise that to achieve the 2030 deadline that's set out in NESO's report, there requires to be an acceleration of the process, which in turn is dependent upon much higher levels of public consent?
Well, I do recognise the point the right honourable gentleman raises, and I'm looking forward to meeting him and his colleagues later on this afternoon to discuss the particular issues in his area. I think the reality is that we do need to build more network infrastructure across the UK in order to make this a reality, but he is right. We want to bring communities with us on this. That's why we've said we're looking again at what community benefits will look like, building on some of the work that the previous government did on consulting on this. But crucially, if we want to bring down bills and deliver energy security, we will have to build this infrastructure, and that's what this government's committed to doing.
We're at Hobart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Minister knows well our Liberal Democrat commitment to community energy. Will the government establish a clean community energy scheme? Look at the barriers that currently face community energy projects, and also look at supporting the national grid to deliver community energy.
Well, the Honourable Lady and I have had a number of conversations on this, and I recognise her commitment on this issue. And we, of course, have also committed to delivering in the local power plan an investment in community energy across the country. I apologise, Mr. Speaker. And importantly, we want to not only invest in those schemes, but deliver across government the mechanisms to make it more possible for communities to deliver these schemes, to build the capacity in communities so that we can see more community energy.
Sir Desmond Swayne.
So what is the beef behind the government's reluctance to embrace with enthusiasm locally generated community projects? Why did it vote, for example, against the Honourable Lady's amendment?
Well, I think the honourable gentleman thinks that was a gotcha question, but of course the party opposite didn't vote for the bill at all. So amendment or not, I don't think he can really speak about what Great British Energy might deliver, since the party opposite, despite Great British Energy being one of the most popular policies in the last election, failed to bother to vote for it.
Shall the Secretary of State, Clerk, continue?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, the National Energy Systems Operator published a full systems cost analysis of the Secretary of State's flagship project to decarbonise the grid by 2030. This morning, the Secretary of State said on several media outlets that the report shows that his plans will lower bills. May I remind this House that the report assumes gas prices which are 40% higher than their own department's estimates, a carbon price at least double what it is now, that they can commission more offshore wind in the next 2 years than in the last 6 combined without moving prices, and build grid at a pace we've never seen before in this country without any delays. And even if all of that is achieved, the report actually shows that the cost of this system will be higher. That's on page 78 of the report, Mr. Speaker. So for the clarity of this House, would the Minister really like to repeat at the dispatch box the Secretary of State's claim that the NISA report shows that Labour's system will lead to a lower cost of electricity?
Minister. Well, Mr. Speaker, what I'm very happy to do is that what the Shadow Secretary of State has outlined quite coherently there is that the party opposite has no ambition in this space whatsoever, and we do. And I'm very happy for the Right Honourable Lady to outline where our ambition is. We will build faster than the previous government, although I have to say that wouldn't be difficult. The person sitting next to her, the Shadow Minister, quite clearly at her conference said the previous government built infrastructure far too slow, and the former Energy Minister said that their onshore wind ban was always mad. So we are quite happy to pick up where they left off and deliver the clean power that this country needs.
Continue.
Mr. Speaker, this is a ministerial team that told the electorate they were going to cut their bills by £300 without doing any homework to find out how those plans will work. They voted against our amendment to hold them to account for their own pledge just 2 weeks ago, and now they're trying to claim that the NISA report shows their approach is going to lower bills, but in fact it shows in black and white that the system is going to be much more expensive. So does he not see that if they follow this plan, we will be a warning, not an example to the rest of the world, and the British people will be colder and poorer as a result?
Minister.
I have to say, Mr. Speaker, time and time again, the party opposite run away from their record in office on this. The reason people right across this country are paying more in their energy bills is because the party opposite didn't get us off the roller coaster of fossil fuel markets. We are now moving at pace, and she may want to keep us in those vulnerable states where we are reliant on international gas markets. We are determined that we will not. We will bring down bills. We will deliver energy security. And I am not ashamed to say we will move with great ambition to deliver what this country needs and to deliver the good jobs that go with it.
Douglas McAllister.
Question number 4, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Great British Energy. We are moving at pace to set up Great British Energy. So far, we've appointed the start-up chair, Jürgen Meyer. We've announced that the headquarters will be in Aberdeen, and we've progressed the bill through the House of Commons. This builds on the first partnership announced by Great British Energy with the Crown Estate, and recently with a new deal to collaborate with Scottish public bodies. We're getting on with the job of delivering a 21st century public ownership for the British people.
Mr. McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, every family and every business in my constituency of Western Bartonshire paid the price of 14 years of Conservative failure with rocketing energy bills because they failed to invest in clean energy. The party opposite continues to oppose Great British Energy, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister recognise the absurdity of the argument the opposition are making, that they're quite happy for foreign public ownership as long as it's not UK citizens who own our energy?
Well, my honourable friend makes a very good point on this question. It is, I think, important to remember that despite what the party opposite might have you believe, Great British Energy is overwhelmingly popular with the British people, and that includes the people in Scotland, because, of course, it wasn't just the Conservative Party who didn't vote for Great British Energy. Surprisingly, the SNP also failed to vote for a publicly owned champion in our energy space. We're getting on with delivering the jobs and growth delivered with public ownership through Great British Energy.
Hello, Brian.
Speaker, before the election, the Labour Party said that Great British Energy would cut electricity bills by £300.
Yes, they did.
Then after the election, they voted against writing that into law, and instead they took away people's winter fuel payments that made their bills more expensive. Now the Institute for Fiscal Studies has said that their policies are fundamentally raising prices for consumers by the tune of £120 per household. And we know from the NISA report that's going to get worse. Even if you triple the pace of wind rollout, double the pace of grid connection, make other heroic assumptions, all this is going to bump up costs further, isn't it? Yes. And we're doing this from the basis of the highest electricity prices in Europe. What assessment has the Minister made of the impact on British industry?
I think what question after question from the party opposite shows is that they don't recognise the part that they have played for 14 years and why we are paying higher bills than ever before. We are the only party with an ambitious plan to get us off the volatile fossil fuel markets, something the party opposite used to believe in our drive to net zero, that we should build this infrastructure for the long term. They're now opposing it, and they'll have to say to their constituents why they want to leave them exposed to these rising bills.
Joe White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Question number 5, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
Thank you. We agree that fusion could be a globally transformative green energy solution. The UK Government's fusion programme continues to lead the world in the development of fusion energy, and our ambition is to continue to do so.
Joe White.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The budget announcement 2 weeks ago was welcome news. The first fusion power plant will be built in Bassetlaw. And can the Minister provide greater detail on this commitment alongside the funding support being made for the next financial year?
Okay. Minister.
The member is a great champion for her constituency, and I was pleased to meet with her to talk that, as well as hearing her Westminster Hall debate. I do look forward to visiting her constituency later this month to see the Fusion Cafe, and also to visit in West Burton, the site of the STEP project, at which point I hope that I will be able to give more detail on what support we are giving to fusion.
Jamie Stone.
Mr. Speaker, Dounreay in my constituency was the site of the UK's first fission reactor. Today we have a highly skilled workforce, a licensed site, and a local population would warmly support the industry. Can I ask the government to look quite seriously at Dounreay in terms of involving it as we bring fusion to the wonderful fruition which it can be?
Minister.
As I said, I think fusion has got huge potential, and there are so many companies that stand to benefit from this. It's not just about the ultimate goal of fusion energy, it's about all the technological advances that we will discover. And I've spoken to fusion companies, for example, are finding a use in terms of cancer treatment. So very interested to hear what the member has to say about the possibilities for fusion in his constituency. We do want to see that proceeding ahead, and if he wants to drop me a line, then I'd be happy to explore what opportunities there are in his patch.
Shadow Minister Andrew Bally.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. We've spoken a lot about the Conservative Party's record in government. Well, one where I am very proud is our record on fusion. We launched the Fusion Futures programme, provided up to £55 million of funding to train more than 2,000 people, became the first country in the world to regulate for fusion, had a distinct energy technology, and launched the process towards building the spherical tokamak for energy production, something I can't say just as quick. What will be the first fusion power plant in West Burton in Nottinghamshire? You are very welcome. So would the Honourable Lady confirm it is still the government's intention, as it was ours, to have fusion power on the grid by 2040?
Minister.
Now, as I said to the Minister, I will be visiting West Burton soon, very much looking forward to that. The budget did announce significant support for fusion energy in 2025 to 26, and yes, we remain as ambitious as the previous government was in terms of the potential of fusion energy.
Honourable Bowie.
Lady, for that answer. So, in confirming that 2040 is still the ambition, what does she think will come first? Fusion on the grid or the final investment decision in Sizewell C?
Seamus Logan.
That the final investment decision on Sizewell C, as I understand it, is expected soon, and we'll be hearing more in the next spending review about support for that. Fusion energy has huge potential, as I said, not just ultimately in the long term, but we are already seeing the benefits from innovation in that sphere now, and that's something I very much welcome.
Seamus Logan.
Question number 6, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
With permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer questions 6 and 7 together. On the 4th of October, the government announced £21.7 billion over the next 25 years to launch the UK's CCUS industry. We will provide further details on the next steps on CCUS, including Track 2 projects like Acorn, in the coming months.
Seamus Logan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the Minister for that answer. It sounds encouraging. But Acorn, including St Fergus and Aberdeenshire, not only has a significant role to play in achieving net zero in Scotland, It also has the capacity to accept carbon from mainland Europe too.
Yeah.
Helping the UK and Europe to achieve net zero goals. This is significant not only for the port of Peterhead in my constituency, as the Minister knows, but for the local power station, which also shares integrated ambitions. Acorn presents very significant opportunities. We're speaking about hundreds of millions of pounds for new investment, new jobs and economic growth for the North East, for Scotland and for the UK. So can the Minister accelerate the decision-making around the Acorn project, and will she commit to funding in 2025?
Minister.
We are committed to Track 2, and I recognise the huge advantages of Acorn that the Honourable Gentleman points out, and our record investment of £21.7 billion demonstrates our long-term commitment and giving industry the certainty it needs. We know that the up and down of CCUS over the previous government's history meant there was not the certainty that people required, and that is what we are looking to deliver. People want clarity, completely understand that, and we will be coming forward in the next few months with more announcements.
Then Meg Hillier.
Mr. Speaker, the path to carbon capture and storage is littered with failure, with 3 previous projects not ever getting off the ground despite lots of taxpayers' money going into it. What precisely is the government going to do to make sure that this project delivers?
Give me a little bit, then I can hear the question.
Can I thank my honourable friend for her question? We realise that CCUS is an emerging industry, but it's also one that we can lead on internationally, thanks to the unique geography of the North Sea. We will do all we can to help industry scale up in this technology, and we believe it will play a crucial role in our mission for clean power.
Dr. Andrew Morrissey.
Number 8, Mr. Speaker, please.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Government regularly meets with stakeholders to discuss the development of our energy infrastructure. Last week, the Government received advice from the National Energy System Operator outlining its advice on the pathway towards clean power by 2030. Later this year, we will publish our 2030 Action Plan, which will set out details on the future of our energy mix.
Dr. Andrew Morrison.
Offshore wind has been a real positive for our energy security and grid independence. But unfortunately not when the wind doesn't blow. Given the election of a president who tells us he's going to drill, baby, drill, what revision does the Minister anticipate to his timetable towards net zero?
Well, as I said in my opening answer, we'll outline later this year our action plan on how we will deliver on 2030, but there's no change to our timetable in that regard. But what it does show, he raises a good point around when the wind doesn't blow and the sun doesn't shine, about making sure that we have a mix in our energy system. It's why we remain supportive of nuclear. It's also why we've announced recently investment in long-duration energy storage to make sure we can capture that energy and use it when we need it.
Then Little Carpenter.
I was delighted with the Ofgem's announcement this morning that the proposed Nautilus interconnection is now recommended to be located at the Isle of Grain and not the Suffolk coast. Since I've been elected, I've made firm representations to the Minister, to Ofgem, including via their consultation, that the Suffolk coast should not have been considered and Brownfield should have been considered first. Will the Minister meet with me to discuss other national grid projects in my constituency?
Well, Ofgem has announced today decisions on a number of interconnectors. These are decisions for Ofgem and not for the Government. But one of the things we have announced recently is the launch of a strategic spatial energy plan to make sure that we are planning these projects holistically across the whole of the United Kingdom, making sure that we take into account a number of schemes like she mentions in her constituency when planning future energy. And I'll continue to have discussions with members about this right across the country.
Nick Timothy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. China's largest offshore floating wind turbine company, Mingyang Smart Energy, plans to build its first manufacturing plant outside China in Scotland. Mingyang benefits from huge subsidies in China, but there are serious questions about energy security and national security. The Secretary of State says he wants to end reliance on foreign autocrats, but when he was asked about this on the radio this morning, he had no answer. Will the ministers rule out allowing any turbines that might be controlled by hostile states?
Well, we are encouraging investment in the UK to build the infrastructure that we need in the future. We've announced just today the Clean Industry Bonus, which will give as much support as possible to companies to build their supply chains here in the country. We'll continue to look at supply chains, and of course we take seriously, as we do across the range of business projects in the country, the companies that are investing in this company and there are a series of processes already underway across government. Whenever anybody wants to invest in this country, those processes will be followed in the usual manner.
Polly Billington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, would you and indeed the Minister give the House an opportunity to celebrate the £1 billion of investment announced today in offshore wind in this country, promising jobs across the country, promise kept by this government, something that, of course, the British people are not used to after the last 14 years. Would he also agree to meet me to discuss the infrastructure required to connect this clean, secure energy to our homes, in particular the Sea-Link project that could impact in my constituency?
Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is absolutely right to highlight the fantastic announcement today by Scottish Power of £1 billion of investment here in the UK, building the infrastructure that we need, but delivering jobs and skills in this country as well. And it is one of a number of announcements that we expect, because we are not agnostic in this government on delivering the industrial strategy that we need. My honourable friend, the Minister for Industry, is working on this at the moment. We will deliver the jobs in this country to build the clean power of the future, to deliver good jobs, well-paid jobs, and the energy security we need.
Andrew Pex.
Number 9, please, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Delivering good jobs is the driving force behind our growth mission and our clean energy mission. Great British Energy and the National Wealth Fund will crowd in private sector investment to spread jobs across the country through investment in clean energy. And I am delighted with the news that the Clean Industry Bonus has today been launched by the Prime Minister, which will incentivise developers to invest in the UK's industrial heartlands, coastal areas and oil and gas communities, boosting jobs and delivering on another of our manifesto promises.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and I'm delighted as well with my honourable friend's commitment to delivering clean energy jobs. It's important to constituencies like mine in Peterborough, which could be the King's Cross for a new core hydrogen network, as recommended by the National Infrastructure Commission, thanks to National Gas's Project Union. National Gas has its hydrogen-ready gas compression site in our city, and we're about to open a new green technology centre to develop new green jobs and apprenticeships. Will the Minister give a commitment to work with local authorities like mine, colleges and businesses like National Gas to deliver new jobs across the supply chain and in all parts of the country?
And I thank my honourable friend for his question, completely agree with his sentiment and commend the work that he is doing in his constituency. Low carbon technology will play, of course, a critical role in our future, from hydrogen to carbon capture to renewable energy. I am pleased that we saw in the budget the funding of 11 hydrogen projects which will drive jobs and growth, and I am really keen to talk to him about his plans for becoming the King's Cross for a hydrogen network, and applaud the work that is going on in Peterborough around green jobs.
Jim Farron.
Is that me or him? maybe, Mr. Speaker, maybe if I start, Jim could finish. Anyway, I'm very, very grateful. In order to safeguard renewable jobs and to create new ones, would the Minister consider a specific project working alongside hydro turbine manufacturers such as Gilks in Kendal and many others around the country, and our farmers, to make use of streams and becks and rivers that go through farmland to create renewable energy and indeed create new jobs?
Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, we are ambitious to create all the jobs that we want to see in the green technologies of the future, and I would be very interested to hear more about what the honourable gentleman has to say. The Climate Change Committee estimates that up to 750,000 net jobs could be created by 2030. The government, the party opposite, has decided they don't support that path, and the question to them is, you know, why are they objecting to all these new jobs that we'll be creating across our country?
Peter Swallow.
Question number 10, please, Mr. Speaker.
Minister.
With your permission, Mr. Speaker, I will answer question 10, 13 and 19 together. We are committed to an ambitious warm homes plan which will upgrade homes across the country, making them warmer and cheaper to run, with insulation and by rolling out low-carbon heating like solar and heat pumps. As a first step, the government has committed an initial £3.4 billion over the next 3 years towards upgrading homes, and we have already hit the ground running with the rollout of our Warm Homes Local Grant and our Warm Homes Social Housing Fund, and we will set out more details in due course.
Hello.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Too many of my constituents are living in poorly insulated social housing, like Dion, a new mother whose social landlord removed insulation in her flat last year because it was full of mould and mildew. She's now facing her second winter without insulation. Will the Minister confirm that the Warm Homes Plan will introduce tough new standards to ensure social housing providers get on and insulate their housing stock?
Minister.
Yes, absolutely, Mr. Speaker. Raising standards in the social housing sector will be a critical part of our Warm Homes plan. We have already announced plans to lift 1 million renters out of fuel poverty by raising the minimum energy efficiency standard in both the private and the social rented sector, which will ensure that renters no longer have to live in cold, drafty homes. We're also unlocking £1 billion worth of investment to the National Wealth Fund in partnership with leading banks to upgrade more social homes, and we will set up more detail to build on this in due course.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Minister for her commitment to Warm Homes Plan. Many of my constituents in North Somerset have written to me in recent weeks detailing their concerns that the scheme does not take sufficient account of higher energy usage from long-term illnesses. Can the Minister share if the Department has any plans to look into uplifting the Warm Homes discount for participants with relevant long-term illnesses?
Minister.
Thank you to my honourable friend for that question. Look, Mr. Speaker, we recognise that many vulnerable people, including those with high energy uses, often bear the greatest burden when energy prices increase. This is why we are doing all we can, including working with energy companies to make sure we're providing additional support this winter and beyond. I will take his specific point away and follow up with him in due course.
And the Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With 64% of homes in Shipley with an EPC rating of D or below, I very much welcome the Government's commitment to Warm Homes Plan. The charity Groundwork provides a Warm Homes Healthy People scheme across Bradford District, installing energy efficiency measures and offering advice and support on energy bills. Does the Minister agree with me that local charities need support to continue to help those most in need this winter?
I thank my honourable friend for her question. It is a national scandal that so many homes across the country are rated below EPCC, a failure of the last government to deliver the scale of home upgrades that we need. And we are determined to end the injustice of people living in cold and drafty homes. I completely agree with you that we must do everything we can to support vulnerable households with their energy bills this winter. That's why we're providing 3.3 million households with a Warm Homes discount. That's why we're working with energy suppliers to provide additional support, including through charities, and that's why we've extended the Household Support Fund.
Mr. Speaker, would the Minister agree that particularly in rural areas where there are very old homes, that we need a comprehensive Warm Homes Plan to identify those homes and ensure that insulation is targeted there to maximise the reduction in terms of energy usage?
Yes, we will be working to make sure that we see upgrades across the area, across the country, in every part of the country. We'll be working with combined authorities, local government, devolved administrations to make sure that we're delivering the scale of upgrades that we need to see across the country.
Tom Gordon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In light of a Warm Homes Plan, is the Minister aware of challenges faced by homeowners who used a Green Homes grant for spray foam insulation? Many now found their homes unmortgageable and face significant costs for removal and repair. So will the Minister consider measures to support homeowners as part of a Warm Homes Plan going forward?
Minister.
Yes, I'm aware that there are many households that have had upgrades that haven't gone to plan, and for me it is absolutely critical that we build confidence in this, because in the end we need to persuade consumers up and down the country to have these upgrades. So there were schemes under the last administration that weren't regulated, that didn't have the standards, and we're working hard to make sure we raise standards across the piece.
Dave Dougal.
Mr. Speaker, we're going to need a Warm Homes Plan because
what we see in Scotland with the snow and ice coming in on a cold front is a some front coming from this Labour government heading north from this government, because what we have is a £600 cut to the winter fuel payment and the pensioners' cost of living payment for winter weather that's here now. And what we also heard, and that wasn't in the manifesto, but what was in the manifesto was a £300 cut to fuel payments, which are now up at £450. So when will this government do a single thing for people facing fuel poverty?
Hear, hear.
Mr. Speaker, we will work across the country to make sure that we're tackling fuel poverty. But I would remind the honourable member that fuel poverty is devolved in Scotland, and you have been delivering the biggest budget, and it's time to get on with the job and fix it.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Pippa Hale.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Homes in the UK are among the least energy efficient in Europe, with unparalleled health, productivity and carbon emission costs to the society as a result of the last government's failure to act. I agree with the Minister that it's a disgrace that this is happening in one of the largest economies in the G7. Whilst we welcome the news of the Warm Homes Plan coming next year, does the Minister agree with me that an emergency home insulation programme this winter with free insulation for people on low incomes is necessary so that the people in South Cambridgeshire don't have to face the choice between heating and eating? Thank you.
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, let me assure the honourable member that we are hitting the ground running with home installations. We're rolling out our Warm Homes local grant. We're rolling out our Warm Homes social housing fund in order to be able to target people this winter, this year, because we need to see the biggest upgrade that we've delivered.
John Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Number 11, sir.
Anybody want it?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Look, as the first step towards the Warm Homes Plan, we've committed an initial £3.4 billion. Within that, we've committed £1 billion that will go towards public sector decarbonisation, because we know that we have to ensure that our schools, our hospitals reduce their energy bills.
Sean Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Minister agree with me that decarbonising the public sector is good for our target for net zero, but it also releases money for more teachers, for more nurses, for more street cleaners, so that those savings benefit our communities rather than energy giants? There are schools across Telford who are crying out for this investment. Will the Minister do all that she can to decarbonise the public sector in the years to come?
Yes, thank you to my honourable friend. I completely agree. Decarbonising our public sector will not just reduce emissions, but will lower bills. We estimated that the £1 billion that we've allocated to the public sector decarbonisation would reduce bills by about £40 billion per year. So a big step forward, but more work to do.
Tim Shannon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Minister very much for her answer? And Minister, it's very clear when it comes to the public sector and the role that they have to play for decarbonisation, that there is a role for all schools across this great United Kingdom. There's also a role when it comes to educating the children that are in those classrooms, because they want to be the pioneers of tomorrow as well. So what's been done to ensure that the good things that happen here in the mainland UK are shared with other regional administrations, for instance, the Northern Ireland Assembly? Thank you.
Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We will be making sure that we're working across Great Britain with devolved administration so that we can do this. There is good practice that's happening across our local government, across our regional government, and we will be working to make sure that everyone can learn from that and that we deliver the biggest upgrade that we have seen in the generation.
Johnny Reid.
Question number 12, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The energy transition presents an incredible opportunity for job creation right across the UK, particularly in our industrial and coastal communities. Through Great British Energy, we will build on Scotland's reputation as a world leader in energy and secure long-term, well-paid jobs in the industries of the future.
Johnny Reid.
Thank you. I recently had the privilege of opening an extension to the Kytemure wind farm in my constituency of East Kilbride and Straven. The extension alone will generate enough power for 53,000 homes for 30 years, and my constituency is also home to part of Whiteley, the largest onshore wind farm in Europe. However, not one of these turbines were manufactured locally, let alone in the UK. Can the Minister advise what steps he is taking to develop UK manufacturing capacity in this area?
Minister.
Well, I know my honourable friend's constituency well, as the next-door constituency to mine, and both the wind farms she speaks about. And she also says, quite rightly, that of all the expansion we've seen in these technologies over recent years, very few of those jobs, particularly in manufacturing, have been in this country. So we will be doing everything we can through Great British Energy and through what we've announced today on the Clean Industry Bonus to grow our domestic supply chains, to build industry in this country and win jobs for Britain.
Harriet Cross.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, just days after the budget, Apache announced that they would exit the North Sea by 2029, citing the onerous financial impact of the Energy Profits Levy, making production beyond 2029 uneconomic. What assessment has the government made of the impact of these policies on current jobs in North East Scotland? And how will Great British Energy compensate for the current loss of these current jobs?
Well, we are working with industry in the north east of Scotland to make sure that this is a just and prosperous transition. We've announced what our next steps will be in terms of responding to court judgments. There's a consultation open at the moment. We'll have more to say about that in the months ahead. But I think the Honourable Lady does have to recognise that if she wants to see investment from Great British Energy, she might have to actually support the creation of Great British Energy in the first place. Her party cannot have it both ways. Either they want a publicly owned energy company to invest in the jobs of the future, or they don't, as her honourable friend has just confirmed from the backbenches. She can't have it both ways.
Let's move on a little bit. Topicals, Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Number one, please.
Who's having it? Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The budget was a major step forward, paving the way for investment in clean home... Oh, no, Sorry, were you coughing me? Sorry, the honourable gentleman was coughing. I thought he was coughing at me. The budget was a major step forward, paving the way for investment in clean homegrown power, creating jobs and delivering energy security. Last week, the energy system operator provided definitive evidence on our clean power mission. It is achievable, can give us greater energy security and lower energy costs. The party opposite have spent the past year arguing for a system that would keep the British people locked into energy insecurity and higher costs. Whilst they are locked in arguments about the past, we are getting on with delivering lower bills, energy security and good jobs for the British people.
Christine Jardine.
Thank you very much. Price cap rise, winter fuel cuts, higher standing charges, lower temperatures are all things that my constituents in Edinburgh West, particularly my pensioners, are coming to me with concerns about. So what is the Secretary of State planning to do to work with Ofgem and the energy companies to come up with a fairer set of circumstances for my constituents and others in similar situations?
We're looking to bring down standing charges. The Honourable Lady mentions, a lot of cases where people are struggling, and we appreciate that, and we're doing what we can. The budget set out how we're going to protect the most vulnerable people, make sure people are supported in the way that they need to be. We have a lot to do from 14 years of Conservative government, which we are trying to unravel, which we are trying to support. And our push to clean energy by 2030 will lead to those lower bills, and that's what we'll be working on.
Don Aldridge.
Mr. Speaker, following on from the exciting announcement of the £1 billion investment into wind power, it would be remiss of me not to mention the Severn Estuary to the west of Weston-super-Mare, with its transformative potential for the generation of clean, renewable energy. Domestic energy potential neglected for far too long in a world of turbulent global energy markets and costs of living. Does the Minister agree with me that the party opposite appeared to have learned absolutely nothing in their time in office, presiding over the worst cost of living crisis in generations and failed to act when needed? Can I urge her to go further and faster?
Order. It's topicals. It's going to be short and punchy. I'm sure we're going to end any minute now.
Delivering clean power for our communities, which the NESO report so clearly stated would lead to lower bills and energy security. Thank you.
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. He's right. There are good projects right across the country that we hope to invest in the lead-up to delivering in 2030. And he's right. The NESO report quite clearly set out that this is achievable. The party opposite wants to continue having the arguments of the past. We are determined with ambition to deliver on the arguments of the future.
Shadow Secretary of State Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is set to announce at COP that he's making the UK's already stringent carbon emission targets even higher. That's despite the fact that we're only 1% of global emissions, and whilst the leaders of the world's highest emitting countries, making up over 60% of emissions, are not attending. The Climate Change Committee has said this target will require, for an example, an accelerated shift away from meat and dairy, less travel, and a gas boiler ban for the British people. And yet the government's approach would see our reliance on Chinese imports, a country which is 60% powered by coal, go through the roof. So does the Minister agree that an approach which is asking for more sacrifice and hardship from the British people in return for more goods from one of the world's largest carbon emitters would mean less jobs in Britain and more carbon in the atmosphere?
Too long.
I think perhaps the Shadow Minister needs to seek a debate if she wants to elaborate on these issues. But I think it's really important. Having attended COP last year as part of a cross-party delegation, it was incredibly depressing to see the way the UK was received. It's really important that we are stepping up and showing global ambition. Reaching net zero in this country and getting to clean power by 2030 is a massive opportunity. It's not a cost.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 824 former miners in Cowdenbeath and Kirkcaldy are rightly delighted that our government has returned over £1 billion from the Mine Workers Pension Scheme to those who powered our country for decades. Does the Minister have plans to deliver similar justice to the 290 members of the British Coal Staff Superannuation Scheme in my constituency and indeed all affected across the UK?
I am proud that we have finally ended the injustice of the Mine Workers Pension Scheme. Miners across the country powered our economy for decades, working in the toughest environments. They shouldn't have had to fight for so long for a fair pension. I travelled to Barnsley with the Secretary of State and met former mine workers and talked about the difference that a Labour government has made. And of course, we will look at any suggestions that the BC SSS scheme come forward with.
We now come to Liberal Democrat spokesperson Pippa Hailing.
Mr. Speaker, the US President-elect Donald Trump has repeatedly called climate change a hoax. I share the concerns of young people in South Cambridgeshire that these views represent a threat to our efforts to tackle climate change. And the global community is meeting right now at the International Climate Summit in COP29 in Azerbaijan. Does the Minister believe and share with me the view that the UK must rebuild its leadership by getting back on track with our climate and nature targets?
I agree with the Liberal Democrat spokesperson that now it is more important than ever that the UK shows global leadership, and that is exactly what the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary and the Energy Secretary are doing with their presence at COP today. I'll be heading out there tomorrow. I'm very keen to work with her cross-party on these issues. I would also say that working with young people is very important as well.
The Minister is already a global leader in climate research. Would the Minister agree with me that this government's mission for clean power will deliver lower bills, energy security and allow this country to enter COP29 as a world leader when it comes to climate action?
Thank my honourable friend for that question. As I've said, showing domestic leadership gives us the credibility to show international leadership too. We'll be doing both.
The Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Forests in North America are being chopped down to supply wood to burn at Drax Power Station at a cost of £2 million a day in subsidies, whilst pensioners will perish this winter. Does the Minister agree with me it's time to end this net zero madness and admit that fossil fuels are a gift of the god?
Well, it perhaps won't surprise the honourable gentleman or the House that I'm not going to agree with his final point there. Net zero is incredibly important to deliver climate leadership and lower bills and the jobs of the future. But on the question on biomass, we rightly expect full compliance with all regulatory obligations on biomass, and consumers rightly recognise the highest standard of accountability from generators.
The picture.
In my constituency of Doncaster East in the Isle of Axholme, there are nearly 1,500 members of the Mine Worker Pension Scheme. Can I congratulate my honourable friend on the historic decision made in the budget to return the investment of the reserve to them? I understand that this will mean a 32% rise in their weekly pension. Can I ask the Minister to confirm this is correct?
Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for the question? That is correct. It will mean on average an extra £29 a week, putting right a wrong that has existed for far too long. And although the money is important and a key part of it, we have done the right thing, and about time to 112,000 members across the country will benefit.
Richard Power.
Thank you for permitting me to raise this important constituency matter from the backbenches. On the 2nd of July this year, during the installation of a ground source heat pump in a constituent's back garden, a gas field was struck and gas released. On the 19th of October, there was an explosion which resulted in the deaths of 2 of my constituents and the continuing evacuation of 50 households. Matters related to the period between the 2nd of July and 19th of October are subject to investigation. I am advised that this is the first such instance of gas being encountered, but with ground source heat pumps expected to play a significant role in decarbonising home heating, will the Minister undertake to review the regulations covering the installation of ground source heat pumps, and will she arrange a meeting for me with the relevant Minister to discuss these matters further?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm sorry to hear about the incident that he's raised. We absolutely need to ensure that standards as we roll out all low-carbon technology is at the highest level, and I will undertake to meet with him to understand the specific circumstances and see what we can do in terms of reviewing regulation.
Adam Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The jet fusion experiment in Oxfordshire has been delivering fantastic scientific results and standing at the forefront of UK science and the fusion experiment internationally. As jet begins to be decommissioned as we move forward to our next large experiment in Bassett Law, can the Minister comment on how we are going to retain all of the excellent science and expertise that's been built up in jet over the past decade?
Minister.
I got to see the jet project when I visited Culham. There's huge potential for a cluster there, many more companies being attracted to that sector. The member is right that we need to maximise the skills that are in there, but I'm confident that having spoken to companies that are being attracted to Culham and speaking to international companies too, that we'll continue to do so.
Ellen Morgan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Lots of homes in my constituency are off-grid, which means that their owners have to fill the tank up at the beginning of winter to keep warm. The pensioners who've lost the winter fuel payment are really struggling with that upfront amount. Can the Minister review the level at which winter fuel payment is removed, because the most vulnerable are struggling?
Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are doing everything we can to help households that we know will struggle with bills this winter. That is why we've had a big push to increase the uptake of pension credit. That is why we are working with energy suppliers to provide additional support this winter alongside our Warm Homes discount that will provide £150 rebate to households in fuel poverty. And we have extended the household support fund as well.
Joe Powell.
Mr. Speaker, I've worked for many years with LSE academic and UK resident Dr. Gubad Ibadogu, who has been arbitrarily detained in Azerbaijan since July 2023 for uncovering corruption in the fossil fuel industry despite a severe medical condition. During COP29, will government ministers meet with their Azerbaijani counterparts to urge the charges are dropped and Dr. Gubad is released?
I understand that the FCDO Minister has raised this case with the Azerbaijani Foreign Minister and urged for Dr. Ibadogu to be allowed to travel overseas for specialist medical care if required. We will continue to use our diplomatic channels to raise our concerns about the protection of freedoms and human rights in Azerbaijan, including for his constituent.
Tom, how are you? Gareth Davies.
Mr. Speaker, we on this side of the House will never stop holding this government to account on their pre-election promise to cut energy bills by £300. Have civil service officials conducted any modelling whatsoever that can legitimise the £300 figure?
Minister.
Well, the figure that we arrived at was brought about by independent analysis. We stand by the reality that the only way to bring down bills is to commit to what we're doing by 2030. The NISO backs that up. His party fails to support that action, and so he now has to answer what is their plan for bringing down bills for people that are paying higher than they've ever paid.
Tim Rocker.
My residents in Macclesfield understand that tackling the climate crisis and getting lower bills go hand in hand. They're excited about Great British Energy, so can I ask ministers whether GBE will invest in community energy projects in places like Macclesfield?
Well, my honourable friend is right to raise the point about community energy. The local power plan that we are committed to will deliver on community energy projects right across Great Britain, and I'm sure Macclesfield will have some fantastic projects that Great British Energy will look like. We want to unleash the potential of community energy right across the country.
Rex Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With National Grid's rationale to rebuild East Claydon substation based on speculative applications, not consented real schemes, will the Minister meet with me to find a way to get National Grid to be more based in reality rather than speculation?
Minister.
Well, I'm happy to look at specific cases, but of course the Secretary of State's role as a final decision maker on some of these planning applications means I can't comment on specific cases. But generally speaking, I think the point he raises is important around looking at how we plan these projects holistically across the country. It's why we've announced the first ever spatial energy plan across the whole of Great Britain.
Richard Perkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The devastating scenes of flooding in Spain remind us all why urgent investment is needed to deal with the deadly consequences of climate change. So would the Minister agree that this urgent investment should be paid for by those polluting companies which have caused the climate crisis?
Minister.
We are hoping that at COP29 in the coming weeks we will be able to achieve or settle on a figure for a new ambitious goal which will bring in finance not just from donor countries but also mobilising private sector finance, using all the mechanisms that we can to make sure that we do get money out to developing countries as quickly as possible. As the honourable member says, it's more imperative than ever to act.
Please, let's just... I've got to get them in. You've got to help them work with me. I'll just...
Bolney and Twynham Parish in my constituency of Mid Sussex host the Rampion wind farm substation. This leads to a number of battery energy storage solution applications. What reassurance can the Minister give my constituency as to the adequacy of the regulatory framework?
Minister.
Well, batteries will play an important role in our energy mix in the short duration storage that we need. We will continue to look at whether the regulatory arrangements are sufficient. Obviously, we want all of these applications to be for safe projects. The regulations are in place to ensure that. If there's any more work that we need to do, we'll happily look at that.
Jane Kirkham.
We had a very successful APPG on floating offshore wind in the Celtic Sea last week. I know the Minister is supportive. I would ask if he would consider mechanisms such as looking at ring-fencing contracts for difference, investment in ports to kick-start that investment in the Celtic Sea.
Well, my honourable friend is right to raise the really important potential of the Celtic Sea in our green energy transition. I'll be in Wales tomorrow to speak at a green energy conference on exactly this question. There's huge potential in floating offshore wind. We want to bring the manufacturing jobs and the supply chain to this country as well, and that's why we've launched today our Clean Industry Bonus to bring that investment here to build the factories of the future and to deliver the good, clean jobs of the future.
Alicia Kearns.
Mr. Speaker, the wind industry has rightly agreed a standard compensation package for rural communities who have big wind plants. But the solar industry, unsurprisingly, is busy whitewashing Uyghur slave labour within their supply chains rather than doing this. So will the government step forward and recognise if they will not act, the government must support rural communities by creating a standardised compensation programme?
Minister.
Well, I know the Honourable Lady has pursued this issue and a number of things to do with the solar industry for a long time. We are looking at all of those options, particularly around community benefits at the moment, to make sure that, following on from the work that the previous government did, in fact, on consulting whether they should be compulsory or not, and making sure they are at a scale where communities genuinely benefit.
Minister. Oh, Dr. Rupert Hook.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My constituent, Connie Hucks, with Arts Council and Lottery, compiled a kids' climate guide. Jamie Oliver's amongst the contributors. Could ministers join forces with her to get it out there, preferably every school in the country, because you've got to start young?
Oh, there we are. Minister, well done.
I would be more than happy to meet with the member and her constituent, who sounds rather familiar, to discuss what more we can do to support climate education amongst children, including in our schools.
Patrick Spencer.
Very much. Mr. Speaker, I met National Grid yesterday. I communicated my concerns about the Norwich and Tilbury line, but we remained constructive and we talked about community benefit schemes. Unfortunately, they told me that the government were dragging their feet on defining a community benefit scheme. So can the Minister update the House on when they're going to bring forward guidance? And can he make a promise that a community benefit scheme is a real, positive, economic benefit for my residents who are impacted by the pylons?
Well, Mr. Speaker, clearly I can't speak for National Grid, but I can speak for this government. In 4 months, we have moved as quickly as possible on what a community benefit scheme will look like for network infrastructure as well as for generation projects. Of course, the party opposite had 14 years to put in place a different scheme, and they didn't. In 4 months, we're moving as quickly as we can.
Perry Moon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As ministers know, the European powerhouse of critical minerals is Cornwall, including vast quantities of lithium essential for our transition away from fossil fuels. Will ministers agree with the industry's call for a target of 50,000 tonnes of lithium?
Minister.
Can I thank my honourable friend for his question? I'm looking forward to seeing him shortly to talk about tin, among other things. And we are looking at our critical mineral strategy. There is a big role to play, I think, in his neck of the woods for lithium and tin, and we will be pushing that as hard as we can.
Chris Law.
Ahead of the general election, the Labour Party were warned that the plans for the North Sea of Scotland would lead up to 100,000 losses of Scottish jobs. Last week, this became a reality when the US oil firm Apache said it'd end all its operations in the North Sea by the end of 2029, citing specifically this UK government's budget and tax regime. So can the Minister explain why this UK government sees the jobs and livelihoods of oil and gas workers in the north east of Scotland as expendable?
Minister.
Well, of course, I don't believe that at all. This government's committed to a just and prosperous transition. The reality is 100,000 jobs have been lost in the oil and gas industry in the past 10 years. If we don't recognise that there's a transition underway and put in place the measures to produce the jobs of the future, we're going to have more job losses. The party that the honourable member represents could have done something about that by supporting Great British Energy headquarters in Aberdeen, but he failed to show up and vote for it.
Another law.
I declare an interest as the chair of the APPG for critical minerals. Domestic supplies of copper and, of course, Cornish tin are critical to the UK's energy security. So what consideration has the Minister given to ensuring that copper and tin are recognised as critical minerals?
Minister.
Well, obviously the process is an independent one in terms of what's on the list of critical minerals, but I have a very strong interest, as does the honourable member, in making sure we are producing as many critical minerals here as we can, and also the supply chains around the world are working for us. So I am looking on a critical mineral strategy which will come forward in due course.
That completes question. Point of order, Clerk Coutinho. Show Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ministers have said repeatedly today that the NISA report shows that their plans would lower energy bills, but page 78 of the report makes it clear that no such thing will happen. So if ministers go and actually read their own report and realise that they've misled the House, could you advise whether it would be appropriate for them to come back and apologise?
I'm not responsible for the Minister's answers, but I'm sure the Minister will have heard it, and if they wish to correct the record, they can do so. Right, let us move now. Let the front benches change over.